Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Safari Pedal Show. I'm your host, Abby. If this is your first time here, welcome to the Crazy Wild Safari Pedals podcast, Zoo Thing Bandwagon. It's great to have y'all here. Today is a particularly exciting day here in the Abbey Safari Jungle because we have a returning guest on the podcast, which is very exciting for me. A returning guest and a very dear friend. Jack Miele is going to be hopping back on the podcast. It's been like a year plus, I believe. At least a year since our last episode, and I learned so much from Jack from our previous chat, from different engineering tidbits, business advice. Like, his business advice has really helped me in so many ways. We today in this chat, oh my goodness, we dove into so many things, from also music in AI to more business advice and a lot of different other tidbits and pieces of advice. I'm really excited for you guys to be able to have a listen to this. I learned a ton from him, as I always do from our chats. So without further ado, let's cut to the episode. Yes. Guys, please give a very warm welcome to one of our first returning guests. And I think it's honestly been too long. Jack Miele, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Abby. Thank you. Yes, it has been way too long.
Agreed.
I think since January. I think since NAMM, right?
I know. That's pretty, if you ask me, disgraceful on our part. Not good. Too long. Because now it's August. What the hell?
I know, right? I'm looking into next year's NAMM, right?
Dude, I realize that, like, at some point, I feel like you really become part of the industry when your life is just like the time between NAMMs.
Right.
That's how time is measured.
Yeah, it's an interesting time of year, definitely. But I enjoy going every year, and it's, I had a really good time this past year, especially hanging out with you, and yeah, it was good stuff.
It was a blast, indeed. For anyone who is unfamiliar with you, or who may not have seen our previous episode, let's start with who you are, what you do, and we'll take it from there.
My name is Jack Miele. I'm a producer engineer from New Orleans, Louisiana. I am also a studio owner here. I've owned multiple studios since 2002. So yeah, since 2002, I've owned about 5 studios, I believe, if I'm counting right. Well, maybe owned 4 and then managed 6, something like that. But yeah, it's I've been definitely somebody who's been doing this for a long time. I really love. I started out as an engineer and sort of moved into production. I really started my life as a guitar player. I mean, that's really what I do. I'm in a touring band as well, and that that's something that I've always had, has been my first love, I guess, is playing guitar, and so that got molded into, hey, I need a studio to record my originals, and the studios that I went to just never could make it sound like I heard it in my head. So I started to learn how to engineer so I could record my own songs, and then you start guinea pigging all your friends so you can get better, and then you start charging people because you're getting way better and you don't want to do this for free anymore. And then it starts to kind of snowball from that. It's like, wow, this is getting way too big for my house. I need a building, so this is it's all of that.
Yeah, I feel like I never asked you like anything about your history and like running studios, owning studios. Like, what was like the biggest lessons you learned for life, for your career, like from running an operation like that?
The biggest lesson you will learn is to know that you know nothing. There's a lot of cognitive blind spots, in there, like, because a lot of times you don't even know what you don't know. And this is not even talking about the technology. Like, okay, see, what did I tell you? You just get me going, and now I'm going. All right. So when you start, one of the things that I am pretty passionate about is when it comes to engineering and producing, is that a lot of guys or girls who get out of school or who just decide they want to do this for a living, they don't understand. They think they're going to get out of school, get a degree, call a studio, and have that studio go, cool, come in. You're somebody who just got out of school and has no real world experience, and we'd love to hire you and give you a salary. It's just so rare. I mean, when I say rare, it's a unicorn. That doesn't, I get an email probably bi-weekly, somebody wanting a job. And I'll ask them about what they've done, and they have little to no experience. They just got out of school. They're looking for a job, and good for them. It's great. It's great that they went to school and learned how to do this. And I unfortunately went to the school of hard knocks and understood early on that not only being a producer, an engineer, you have to be a business person. You have to understand things that you're like, wait, I was told there would be no math, like things like accounting and things like how to be in good standing with the state that you live in so that you can get your business, how to not violate property codes, because hey, I want to put a student. I did it without thinking twice about it, but it was little did I find out later that it was illegal. But I was running a business out of my house, and didn't have an operating license. This is in 2002, because I basically just didn't know any better. I was like, oh, cool, I own this house, so I'll convert this part of the house to a studio and I'll have people come in, but that house is not zoned for C1 commercial property. You don't have handicap parking spots. You don't have a handicap rail. You don't, there's all these things that you learn along the way. And you just, knock wood, thank God, I didn't get into trouble or shut down or anything. And then after that, Hurricane Katrina hit in 2005, after I had owned that studio out of my residence. I mean, when I say own a studio out of my residence, I spent 50 or 60,000 in construction and like built an attachment out of the garage and on. I had this like mother-in-law suite in the backyard. It was really strange. It was like a separate house in the backyard that was probably, I don't know, just 600 square feet or 500 square feet or something, but it was just a room, and it did have a roof and everything, but it didn't have anything in it. It was just a blank room that I guess that the owner didn't know what to do with it or didn't finish it. So what I did was I got construction guys with no permits, to come in and connect the back of the house with a hallway from the garage. It was like a giant shotgun. It was like from the back of the house, connected a hallway to this mother-in-law suite, which became the drum room. So I had a multi-room studio. I had a vocal booth with glass. I had a drum room with cathedral ceilings. I had ISO rooms and all this stuff. It was probably a 3-room studio, and I had a control room, and it was not acoustically sound or anything like that. And I got lucky in certain spots because the control room didn't sound terrible. The drum room was way too reflective. Just like I said in that blog that I just did for you, that I really didn't know what I was doing. The room was way too small to have those kind of reflections. I should have made the room more dead, which I eventually did. The point is that I put my money where my mouth was, and I just said, okay, I'm gonna, take this money that I saved, and I'm going to put it into, saving money from gigs, and I'm going to put it into building a studio. I built a studio. I charged $300 a day, and I basically couldn't keep the doors closed. We were so inundated. I was so inundated with work that I was just making, it was funny. I actually had a studio owner that I interned at tell me, he said, because he was a studio that was like the higher tier studios. And he said, man, he's like, I was making way more money when I charged $300 or $400 a day than I am when I was, charging $1,000 a day. Because what would happen is the old Sam Walton thing. You charge less, but people buy more.
Yeah.
So when I was charging $300 a day, that was enticing for a lot of people. And I didn't have any overhead. I owned the house, so it was just all profit at that point. So of course I had the money that I invested, but I didn't really I didn't see that as a loan. I just saw it as investment money. Once again, not knowing what I was doing. But I took that money that I made every day, like I was making $300 a day, but I was working every day, and I was working for 10 hours a day, 12 hours a day, because that's another thing is that what is a day, quote unquote, Yeah. And so it took me a while to realize, okay, a day is 10 hours. And then it's $30 an hour after that. And then, but it was very hard on my marriage because at the time, because there were people traipsing through my house all the time, all hours of the night, working constantly because I was so passionate about it. I was so laser focused. Yeah, not to get too long in the tooth, but I basically didn't know what I was doing, but I learned on the job, if you will, and made money while I was doing it. So it's like, instead of paying to go to school, I was being paid to go to school, because a lot of these bands that were coming in, they're young indie bands. They just want some cheap place to record, and they just want to get their music out. And I cared. And a lot of times that's all that matters, is that somebody cares about the end result as much as they do, you know? So if you go to one of these studios, I wasn't the most seasoned, but I was somebody who would work tirelessly to make it sound as good as I possibly could at that moment. And sometimes I failed, and sometimes I succeeded, you know, and learned along the way. So yeah, when Katrina hit, that studio flooded, unfortunately. It flooded with about 10 inches of water. So maybe a foot. Basically, it came up to, if this was the bottom piece of gear in the rack,
Yeah.
the water line came up to here.
Wow.
So like, it just missed the bottommost piece of gear. And I even remember what the bottommost piece of gear was. It was an Altec 1591 compressor that I still have.
Wow.
And all the power supplies were trashed. You know, it's so funny. Don't ask me why it was on the floor. I don't know why it was on the floor. But I had a Neumann TLM 103 that was on the floor of the studio. I think I might have been miking a bass cabinet or something like that, but it was like laying on the floor. And I remember, as I was walking out to evacuate, I saw it on the floor, and we had never been flooded. I was almost not even worried about it. But I remember, as I was like, whatever. And I bent over and I picked it up, and I just put it on the desk. And when I did that, it was the last thing I did when I walked out. And that mic I still have. It would have been destroyed if I wouldn't have picked it up off the floor.
Wow.
But I still have that TLM 103. I have a pair of them now, but I still have that one that I saved. So I basically had to replace all the power supplies, and I have all this gear now, but I have no place to go. So in the wake of Katrina, there were a lot of people who had evacuated. There were a lot of people who had all this rental property that had nobody in it. And so I rented a place in the Bywater, which half the Ninth Ward was destroyed, but all the Ninth Ward and the Bywater on the riverside wasn't flooded. It was all the stuff like on the riverside of St. Claude wasn't flooded, and all the stuff on the lakeside of St. Claude was all destroyed. So I rented something on the riverside of St. Claude and started going there. And that's really my first foray into like getting like made more major acts, more, because it's because of the where it was located, the people who were involved, me and Dave Perner from Soul. It was Dave Perner from Soul Asylum's place, and he didn't want to deal with it anymore after Katrina. So I said, I'll take it. I'll run it. So he left his gear there. I brought my gear there. I started running that. Started doing people like Dr. John, Crumbling Shorty, stuff like that. People started coming in, and that was like really where I first started being in like the pro game. And I did that for 4 years, and then bought a building after that and started Fudge.
I'd mentioned it to you before we popped the camera on. There's a lot of AI batshit craziness going on the interwebs. We just had like the Velvet Sundown saga that occupied my YouTube algorithm for like 2 weeks. Like, as someone that's been in audio and you have like credits under your belt and like you've done things, like how is it for you kind of like stepping into this new era? Where do you think we're going on this crazy train?
So there's a couple of angles to this. If it depends on how far the technology gets, in my opinion. Where we are now, and I think where we are in the short interim future, I feel like AI is it's a tool like anything else. You know, I use it in certain plugins that have AI learning. Learn the whatever, it learns the EQ curve and put it on. Yeah, it's great. I have seen some technology that is, eyes only kind of technology that scared me, that basically made me say, we're all going to be out of a job, but there is a thing here. There's AI only knows what you tell it, so it doesn't, AI really, at least the way that I see it, and I've done a lot of research on this, but the way that I see it is that AI will make an idea better. it will take your idea and say, if you said, I'm just going to use an arbitrary idea. I have an idea to whatever, build a circuit that does this, that, and the other. Let's say I want to build a circuit that, integrates germanium transistors to create like a fuzz, but I also want it to be LED, and silicone also, and I want it to also have a compressor built in that's optical, and this complex circuit or that does all these things. And and I'm not an electrical engineer, but I'm just spitballing here. The idea the inception still came from you. So you had to tell AI, I want to do this, that, the other, and the other. And what it did was it expound on that idea and basically said, okay, the best way to do this would possibly be to do this, that, and it would give you a schematic. And then you'd have to look at the schematic and you'd have to go, yeah, I don't know if I like that. Okay, there's this. And, but what AI is not going to do, it's not going to say, I've got a great idea for you, Abby. The next move for you is to present to your employers this circuit. It's going to be the next big thing. I think it's great. You know what I'm saying? So the inception comes from humans. And so, and most ideas come from almost irrational thinking. Almost the most great ideas, like nobody said in the 1800s, it'd be amazing. Like, I think it's totally possible to build a motorized machine that can fly in the air like a bird. I mean, even Da Vinci was trying to do this, and, they couldn't understand how to make it happen, to get enough lift, to get enough thrust, and all these types of things. Or in the 1800s, I think we should build a giant bomb on the bottom of a cylinder that can put a man in space. That's an irrational idea. So when you think about that, and you think about like where real inventions come from, just like, Philo Farnsworth invented TV. He was a 20-year-old farm boy, and he came up with the idea of interlacing lines when he was doing his farming. He basically said what he would do is every other line, he would plant a new crop. So he would plant, I don't know what he planted, but he would plant soybeans, but then in the next line, he would plant tobacco, and then soybeans, tobacco. So that the soil would act a certain way. And then he would reverse it. It would turn so that and he said, why can't you do the same thing with a picture? And so he drew this up. This is 1919, 1920. Television was not even a thing. He says, you could do that with an image and transport it like radio signals. Why couldn't you do that? And so this was an irrational, crazy idea. And he brought it to one of his teachers. And actually what ended up happening is RCA, I think it was in the 30s or 40s, RCA tried to take the idea and claim it as their own. And it went to court. And the teacher from 1920 still had the original piece of paper that the kid had given him when he was young, talking about this concept, and the court awarded the patent to Farnsworth. This is the same thing. Where am I going with AI? Will AI think about what humanity needs, and what's going to help us, and no, people are going to use it like a tool. Now, once we get into the future, 20 years, maybe you have AI that does inceptualize and conceptualize ideas from its own. And once that happens, then there'll be a sea change. Once that happens, you'll have the change of, okay, I'm going to use this AI as my producer. It knows best, as opposed to, the creativity of humans. So that's really what it's about, is when AI creates, it doesn't create from a place of creativity. It's creating from pattern recognition and from what you tell it and what you feed it. Its food is data. When you feed it enough data, it gives you a result. But it doesn't objectively or subjectively look at picture that it created and go, wow, that really makes me feel a certain way. So because it's missing that component, that is what humans will be used for. But once you're able to simulate that component, things could get weird.
Yeah, I'm curious to see kind of like where we go from here, because I feel like we're at a point that we're like so in it that it's like hard to see it from the outside yet. I also wanted to bring this up for you as a returning guest on the podcast. I think our last episode, it was a while back. I think like, are we nearing like a year almost?
I think it was over a year, I think.
So that episode, I think, was one of like the most earth-shattering episodes for me personally because of all of the business advice that you dropped. And there were a few points that I want to highlight and maybe bring back into the conversation for people that are just kind of like hopping on the podcast now. There was a line that literally like shifted the direction of my career that you said. I can't quote you perfectly, but you said something along the lines of, Abby the producer and Abby the person are two different things. You have yourself as the person, then Abby the producer is a brand that has the ability to put out product that can be measured, it's quantifiable, it's definable in like all these different ways. And your business advice, like in that sense, really, after I started listening to you, it was kind of like my first wave of like real paid work. So I wanted to kind of bring that back into the conversation, pieces of business advice for maybe new producers and engineers that are starting out when it comes to branding and practical tidbits.
My advice to upcoming engineers, producers is, this sort of rolls into my story earlier. You really, really have to stop thinking that somebody is going to take you in. It does happen. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but you need to basically hope for the best and plan for the worst. So the worst would be, okay, I have this skill set, right? I am on my own. I noticed, and I tell, so I tell this to a lot of guys that work under me. I said, look, like there's a lot of times where bands, they just want to get their shit recorded. They don't really know, or like yes, does it matter that you worked with these people or that you are, yes, does it matter that you're good? Absolutely. You have to be good. But there are a lot of people that they're young musicians. They don't know what good is. You see what I'm saying? So if you have somebody who has a novice ear for sonics, how are they going to know what is a great kick drum sound? They're not. They're not going to know. And I'm not saying that in a disparaging way at all. It's just facts. I don't know how to solve or how to calculate von Neumann's equation, because I'm not a physicist. It's like, so I just don't, I'm not saying that in a bad way to anybody but they're trusting you. They're coming in and they're trusting that a little bit better than they do. I would venture to say that, I always say this to people, it's the guy who owns the gear and the guy that has the place that gets the gig a lot of times. Look, I've gotten some really high profile gigs in my life, not because they came into town and went, oh, Jack Miele's here, we're gonna work with him. It's because I owned the studio, and it was because I was the house engineer, and it was because I had the gear that they wanted. And so they came in and they said, we've looked online, we looked at the room, your gear list and all this stuff. We would love to book some time while we're in town. And this is for, like I said, major artists, that have come through. They might be coming through town and they want to come to New Orleans for 2 days early before their show, and they want to work, and they work with you, and you end up getting credit on some major record, and that happens a lot. And it happens all day long in LA. The staff engineers at Westlake are like probably easily getting great credits just because they work there. But you know how hard it is to get a job there. So if you can't get a job there, what you do is you create your own action. You say, okay, I'm going to build my own studio. I have a Pro Tools rig. I have good mics. I have this. So basically, the $50,000 that you would have invested in school, take that money and buy some gear and rent a room and make the room sound good and start getting on the phone and hustling and get people in and learn as you go.
This is something I really appreciated when we did our first episode together, was like your emphasis on proactivity. That is like, I'm not going to wait for the ball to be in my court. I will build a new court here in my backyard if the court over there is not working for me. And I want to highlight to the amazing viewers that your approach from like last episodes till now is what really led me to start getting paid work. Exactly what you said. So I want to say, like, tested and proven. It
quantifies results, doesn't it?
Yeah. Tested and proven, and like you have not led me astray thus far. And kind of like you said, it got to a point where, like you said, you do the audio ambulance chasing for some time, and then you do it enough to where you kind of build up enough of a name, and then you get a return on that investment. Then it's like, yes. Oh, a message from you, an email from there.
Then the phone starts ringing for you. You don't have to call anymore. It's coming the other way.
Yeah.
And then, you do things to keep those relationships going. Like maybe there's a band that you recorded an entire album for that you haven't heard from in 2 years, and so you basically call them or text them because you have a relationship with them. Go, hey man, let's do it. What are you guys doing? And so you keep those. It's all, this entire industry is about relationships, and you know that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Somebody asked me, what's the biggest piece? It might have been you. What's the biggest piece of advice you can give somebody? And I say it ad nauseum. Always bet on yourself. If you know that you have the will to do it, always bet on yourself, because that's what I mean by that is what you said about how I know it's scary. I know you're taking this plunge, but if you have enough confidence, not even necessarily enough confidence in your talent or in your skill set, that shit'll come. Talent's cheap. Talent comes, everybody's got talent, know? I mean, there's so many people every person on this earth has something that they're talented for. Something, so talent is, but it's how you nurture talent. It's what you do with talent. Talent's cheap. It's the past, what you've been given, and what you do is what's important. Because I know, look, I personally, I'm not going to name any names. I know some talented artists that they're crazy good, but they're lazy, and they don't have the will to do what it takes to make it in this industry. Look at you. You work tirelessly. You're doing podcasts, you're doing records, you're doing interviews, you're doing blogs, you're constantly doing something. Your face is ubiquitous out there in this industry, and you're somebody who's becoming known as that person. And this industry needs you, Abby. And I am basically saying to all of you people out there who dream of doing this, is that you need to be like Abby, because that is the key. The way she's going about it is the way that people go about it. And just in 1 year's time, you have yielded more results than any college, And look, don't get me wrong. I know all the colleges are going to get pissed I'm saying this. I'm not trying to say college is a waste. I'm saying that college wasn't for me. It wasn't. And look, and I went to college for jazz guitar, jazz performance. Once I learned all the jazz courses, because I wanted the information, all I had left was math and English and science. I quit. I got what I wanted. I wanted the music information. So once I got that information that I paid for, I left. Because name anybody who cares if you have a degree in this? I don't know a single artist or studio who gives a rat's ass if you have a degree in this. And this is me being a grumpy old man shouting at clouds. But it's like trying to get a degree to be a race car driver. It's nobody cares. Can you drive? That's all they care about.
Yeah.
So that's the reason why I say learn in the field, and another thing, this is another thing that's important. When you do records that you get paid for whatever, and you might not know what you're doing. Those records are going to come out whether you like it or not. So there is like almost like an embarrassment factor. Like it's almost like a motivation. Like I'm going to work so hard to make this sound as good as I can, because if not, it's going to follow me for the rest of my life. This bad sounding record. I've got records like that like they come on, like I'll see them on like a Spotify playlist, and I'm like, oh. Like, you know, but you did your best. It's a snapshot in time. You did your best that you could at that time. And as long as you wake up every day knowing that I did absolutely the most that I could do with this, then you can live with yourself.
Yeah.
You know, because music is subjective. You might think it sounds terrible, and somebody else might think it's genius.
That's the thing about me. I won't put these goals on freeze. You cannot stop me. I'm eating spinach and broccoli. Termination like I'm